that we can be respectful of the folks that came here on time and want to get home at a reasonable time this evening. I'm Dennis Rosenbaum, a compliance officer and community liaison. This is Dr. Tom Christoff, my colleague in Rosenbaum and Associates, and also Amy Ruiz in the back, who works with us here in Portland. I really want to thank all of you for coming out here tonight, and if there's anyone on live stream YouTube, we welcome them as well if they couldn't make it here. I know that you're here because you care about public safety, you care about your communities, and I respect that. I grew up here and have a great deal of motivation to help improve Portland any way I can. So this opportunity for us to share our latest findings in our third quarterly report and get your feedback and make some plans. Can we switch the slides here, Tom? Okay. There's various ways to participate. I just want to remind you there are copies of the our draft report in the back of the room. It looks like this. Also, it's posted on our website for those of you who are not here tonight at portlandcocl.com. Oh, I also forgot to mention the restrooms are down the hallway. I was told to do that, and I apologize. Am I supposed to remember anything else? I don't know. So if you feel free to speak, we will have a question and comment section. But if you don't want to, or if you know people that are not here, please email your comments into us by November 5th. Yes, at this email address here, Rosenbaum Associates, LLP, by 5 p.m. on the 5th, and then we will finalize the draft. On the agenda, I've already made some introductions. We have other members of our team who are not here tonight. We have some very talented people all around the country, some with expertise in law enforcement, some with use of force expertise, some with data analysis expertise. Captain Ashley Heiberger is in Pennsylvania, Sergeant Heather Daniels in Illinois, Dr. Jeff Valport is in South Carolina, and Megan Moeller's in Texas, and Dr. Chris Campbell's here in Portland. So we have a lot of people that we use very strategically and tactically to achieve certain objectives with the compliance. I also, if anyone's here from the new Portland Committee on Community Engaged Policing, or PCEP, welcome. I don't know if, is there anybody here that's on that group? No? Okay. Oh, are you? So if not, or if they're on live stream, we welcome them. We will be working more closely with that group. I know they're responsible for engaging the community in the settlement agreement process over time, and we wish them the best. And I know that even though it took a long time to get moving, I know that there's been a lot of progress in the last 2 months. Excuse me. So the agenda, Tom and I are each going to summarize. I'm going to summarize the training section, and Tom's going to talk about employee information systems, and we'll open it up for comments, and then we'll try to give somewhat of a brief summary and new directions from there. If we can just go to the next slide, Tom. Is this the one? Yeah, so just to remind, some of you already know this, but I'll just be really brief, that the way the parties have agreed we would structure our work is on quarterly reports. This allows the city and the police bureau and DOJ and the COCL to focus on specific areas where substantial compliance is still needed and give detailed, both an assessment and detailed efforts to correct those. So we did the mental health services, crisis intervention in the first quarter of 2018. Those sections, by the way, are sections of the settlement agreement. Second quarter, we did a big report on use of force. Third quarter, which is this one, which we've drafted October 1st, we have training and employee information systems. Now, at the end of the year, probably in mid-January, we will turn in another draft on police accountability, officer accountability, which is Section 8, and community engagement, which is the new PSEP and all of that work, and the Police Bureau's community engagement plan. Didn't know I was going to lose my voice tonight. So let me go on and talk briefly about training. Do you want to switch to training, Tom? So the settlement.
Use your voice. I mean,
Yeah.
we could always go with the sign language.
That's true. Well, I'm not too good at that. I apologize. Come on up. So the settlement agreement does talk about an effective training system, and that's the way we've approached it, as systemic approach. And so what you see here are 5 areas where the Police Bureau, we expect them to have the capacity to do these things that are listed here. And so these dimensions are how we evaluated their performance overall and how DOJ is pretty much evaluating them. And in particular, so we start by the Bureau being able to identify areas where officers require training. So knowing what the needs are of the officers and doing an adequate needs assessment and a training plan. Then they need to develop and deliver appropriate and high-quality training based on those needs. And then they need to develop and implement a valid and useful system to evaluate training. So not to know whether the training is being well received by the officers, is covering the content that it should, whether the instructors are doing a good job, that sort of thing. And then documenting and reporting on training delivered and received. So having systems in place that keep track of all the training. And finally, audit. The Police Bureau is required in the settlement agreement to audit the overall training system to ensure that it's accountable. All right, so let me go through each of these 5 kind of briefly, and then that'll be it for the training section. The next slide, Tom. The needs assessment. So the Police Bureau annually is required to conduct a needs assessment, and we have studied it very carefully, given them a lot of detailed feedback. And at this point, we feel confident that they have a very solid needs assessment in place. It's comprehensive. It draws on a variety of sources. Excuse me. Looking at the core disciplines, state law, and the requirements of the settlement agreement, for example, looking at policy changes. Of course, we expect that they'll utilize the needs assessment for future training, and so we're waiting to see how that comes out in terms of the topics that were recommended, especially by the community and stakeholders, but also by the officers. So at this point, we're giving them substantial compliance. Tom, do you want to go on to the next one? So appropriate and high-quality training. So here the Bureau is required to develop and deliver this quality training. I have to say that since we started over 4 years ago, that they've made pretty substantial strides in putting out good training. Training on use of force, on critical decision-making, on procedural justice, and other subjects that were important to the settlement agreement and relevant to the community. It's been more responsive to the defined needs of the community and the officers. They've reconceptualized the idea of de-escalation. We talked about that last time, how gaining voluntary compliance is a good alternative to using force in a lot of situations. And I have to say, in the last year, there's been a more significant improvement. The 2018 in-service training in particular covered some of the topics that we've been harping on for some time, including procedural justice and bias and communication skills. There was a 4-hour class on this in the 3rd section of the fall 2018 in-service training. And however, we still gave, although we gave conditional substantial compliance because we're conditioning that upon the Bureau making a good faith effort in 2019 to give officers additional opportunities to practice interpersonal communication skills in a non-classroom training scenarios. Now, officers, just to clarify that, it's like a lot of other skills. You not only need to know, first of all, you have to believe that these things are important. Communication skills, treating people with respect, listening to them, being unbiased in your encounters. It's step number one. Step number two is to know what it looks like in real life and in practice as a police officer. Step three is to practice it yourself. And step four is to actually get feedback on how well you're doing. So the Police Bureau has made very good progress on the first two, and I think they're well along toward getting more practice in those areas. I do want to acknowledge that the Bureau and the city has agreed to hire 3 new positions in the Training Bureau, 1 in leadership, 1 in ethics and procedural justice, and 1 in officer wellness and stress. And I do believe that if these are positions of authority where they do some innovative work, that that type of training will in fact have beneficial effects down the road in terms of improving police-community relations, depending, on how they're operationally defined. So we'll be interested in seeing how that plays out. Tom, can we go to the evaluation? Yes, valid and useful system of training. We give them substantial compliance here. I mean, this is an area where a couple years ago we were quite disappointed, frankly, in the way that the Bureau was evaluating its training. It was much more limited. They have now a pretty strong system in place over the last year and a half, and they have standardized student evaluation, so the students in the class, the officers, get a chance to evaluate the instructors, evaluate the classes on the same dimensions. They give knowledge tests to see if the officers are learning anything. They've developed some preliminary systems for scoring scenarios to give officers feedback on how they did on role-play scenarios. So there's a lot of good things in place that were not there before. I think the challenge now is how to use the evaluation results to improve training. So they have, in fact, come up with a fairly detailed plan to introduce these feedback loops where the survey results are immediately given back to people in charge at the training academy and discussed with instructors. Sometimes immediately, if it's an in-service, it's going to go on for weeks and weeks. There may be some need for immediate corrective action, and they're doing that. Other times, it's a more thorough analysis of the data after the training is over to see which instructors did well and which did not, and where changes and improvements are needed. So because of this more systematic approach to evaluation, we give them substantial compliance on this. So if we can go on to the fourth one, documenting, reporting, training delivered and received. The Bureau, by the settlement agreement, is required to keep accurate electronic records of the training delivered and received by department members and ensure that supervisors review their officers' training records. That's paragraph 81. The training, the report on training has to be delivered and received to the administration, paragraph 82, and the guidelines for the selection of officers to ensure that they do not have a history of using excessive force. This is for trainers. That's paragraph 83. We gave them substantial compliance on 82 and 83. They have been watching out for excessive force. They have been delivering the training to the administration. But we gave only partial compliance on 81, which we did our own audit of the Bureau's new learning management system. It's a new software system they've created. And although it has great promise, there were not currently meeting all the requirements of paragraph 81. So we're waiting to see if the Bureau can put in place a system that includes the historical training records. They're working hard on that, but it's a major lift to get years and years of data into this new system of officers training in the past. We're also expecting them to be able to access the training records through this LMS. And our understanding is that's well along right now, but we need to look at that a little bit more. and that they can independently verify supervisors' reviews of the LMS record. Supervisors are required to go in, use the LMS system. So this system has promise, but the Bureau's, it's a big effort to get it fully implemented and up and running. So we're, at this point, it's at partial compliance. So let's move on to the audit. The Bureau is required to conduct an audit of training, as we talked about, paragraph 85. Overall, this audit that they did was a nice job. It was pretty thorough. It was some competent individuals involved in conducting that, and we've given a lot of feedback about the audit to them. They did focus the first audit on the Advanced Academy, which is recruit training, and on the field training and evaluation program. It's for new officers, the field training officers. This audit did respond to the 7 audit criteria that were in the settlement agreement, and they did identify some deficiencies in training records that are being corrected, and if they hadn't, I would suspect that the audit was not good enough, but they did, and that's a good sign. The audit, though, fell short in a couple areas that we're concerned about. It didn't really address the status of this LMS system that we talked about a minute ago, which I think is the primary database for future training audits. I don't feel it gave sufficient credit to the needs assessment, although that's there's many ways of looking at that. Or they did not really discuss the various methods that were used to evaluate training. I think the Bureau did a lot of good work that should have been acknowledged in the audit. Some of this is a timing issue. They focused on 2016 data, and which was kind of outdated, and they had to for reasons that was a complete data set. But the 2017 time period would have focused more on the LMS. So we've given substantial compliance in that it was with conditionality, that it's addressing these issues that I just mentioned in the next training audit, which should be completed, I believe, this year. So that covers the sort of 5 basic areas of training that our report deals with. And I think, I'm wondering whether we should have brief questions now or wait till you're done. If there's something about training, maybe we should spend 5-10 minutes now, and then we'll come back at the end. You can always ask more questions. But yeah, go ahead.
So in section 2, in the training content section, you mentioned that community needs and expectations are included in the evaluation of that content. How do you go about gathering that community input?
Is this on the needs assessment?
Number 2, the content of training. Okay.
So the Bureau has, well, that's a good question. So they have survey data from before.
Before, can you clarify that a little bit?
There was citywide survey data on how the community feels. They've also, I know, been responsive. Only this is recently now that the needs assessment draft, which is out now, is responsive to events that have occurred in Portland. For example, crowd control. Given that there's protests in Portland a fair number of times, they are interested in having supervisors be trained in the management of crowd control. Now that's something that's going to be done, I believe, next year. But systematically, I'm trying to remember the other sources of data. Well, some of it's citizen complaints. The complaint data come in, and they utilize that, and indirectly, communities, the way that force encounters are handled. Before this all started, that was not really built back into the feedback to the training, but the force audits that are done where they read the force reports and the after-action supervisory reports about those force incidents, if something didn't go right there or something was out of policy or something, they feed that right back to the training academy now. So is there anything else, Tom, you want to add to that I'm not thinking of?
So 2 of the things that go into the training needs assessment too are the Training Advisory Council, which is a group of community members and also for mental health training, particularly the Behavioral Health Unit Advisory Committee will provide input, and that's, you know, I don't know how much you know about them, but that's a group that has community members, persons with lived experience, peers, and mental health professionals. So in terms of that specific community, they're getting training input from that too.
Good point.
And does anybody mind if I ask one more question?
Okay, go ahead.
So you said that they are they're evaluating trainers for a history of excessive force. How are they going about doing that?
You want to respond to that, Tom?
Sure. So they have for lack of a better term, an Excel sheet where it has the criteria that is listed. So there's certain criteria that's listed in the settlement agreement, and PPB has also put on their own criteria. I forget the SOP number off the top of my head right now, but there is a list of things, of qualification criteria. And so when somebody is going to be looked at to be hired as a trainer, they are looked at in terms of all those qualification criteria. So what we've seen is that worksheet for each person that they go to hire. And if everything, you know, passes, then they're eligible to be hired. If something doesn't, if they don't qualify for one of the reasons, then they wouldn't be considered, particularly for the use of force in the last 3 years.
Can you give an example of some of the reasons that might be on that Excel sheet?
I mean, the one that's based on the settlement agreement is the use of force against somebody within the last 3 years. There's also supervisor assessment. There are, I'd have to go back and look at it, but the biggest one is the one that's required in the settlement agreement, that you can't have used excessive force against a person with mental illness in the last 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Dan Handelman with Portland Cop Watch. And,
Only 1 minute, Dan. No.
Yeah, you're funny. So first, I just want to start out by saying that we don't get paid for what we're doing. But what we did was we redid your scorecard with 4 columns. We added a column for the previous rating so that you can see what's changed between the last one and now. And we added a different color for substantial conditional compliance so that the Bureau, as we've mentioned for the last 3 quarters, doesn't look at it and see all the green and think that they're in substantial compliance, because that's a psychological thing. So I can hand you this copy when I'm done chatting.
Okay.
I don't know, did you cover paragraph 84 in an earlier slide? Because I didn't see it go up.
I don't remember. What was 84 again?
It's the different kinds of training they're required to give out. Oh, actually, the 4th column, which I forgot to say, is a very short summary in a few words so that people know what the paragraph's about, so that, which is another thing we suggested to you a while back. So there's several subparagraphs in 84 covering the various kinds of training they're supposed to give. You did cover it in one of the slides?
Only indirectly, in that I covered training as a whole. So this one is 84A, or all of 84? Oh, no, we covered 84, yeah. 84 is all about the training. That was...
Some of those things were the procedural justice training, some of those things.
Yeah. Is there something in particular you're concerned about?
No, I just wanted to see, because I walked in a little late.
Yeah, no, that was slide 7, appropriate and high-quality training.
So following up on Jasmine's question about excluding officers, you said there's other criteria other than being found to have used excessive force that the Bureau put in the standard operating procedure. I don't know if I've ever seen those, but I do want to just say here that there was a lieutenant that was put into the training division, and this should be in your report, for a very short time, for a couple of months. Leo Besner, we call him the $1 million man out in the community because he's cost the city over $1 million in lawsuits. And then we know of at least 2 complaints that he had within a 6-month period, I believe, where he did the same thing to people observing police, where he grabbed them by the arm and physically moved them, and they accused him of excessive force, which would have made an EIS, I know you haven't talked about that yet, but it would have made an EIS trigger. And I wonder if that he was pulled out of the training division because of those incidents. Because it would be nice for us to know that that system is working to do something, because the rest of the report makes it sound like it's not really doing much of anything.
Well, that's a good point. We don't know the reason he was pulled, do you, Tom?
I
But
don't
we,
know.
we can look into that and see if that's, we know of him because we've been over there a lot.
Okay. And then the last point I want to bring now is that you talked about the Training Advisory Council's recommendations being considered for the training needs assessment. I went through the needs assessment document. It's very long. And I had to kind of look at the footnotes to try to see where the different things came from, because each one has a different set of footnotes. But I only found one place where Training Advisory Council was mentioned, and the only things that they recommended that were put in that needs assessment had to do with learning systems. There was nothing about being nicer to the community or some of the other things that they made recommendations about. Did I miss something, or are some of the Training Advisory Council's things not being absorbed into the needs assessment?
Which needs assessment are you reviewing, Dan? Is it well, the other one's not out yet, I don't think, the 2018. So it's 2017 needs assessment. I don't remember that in particular, but I do know that the kinds of things you're talking about were listed under community and stakeholder input, as I recall. But I can go back and check that. When you say the learning, like the management system, is that what you're saying is the only thing that the learning management's? Yeah. No, I mean, this is a question mark about needs assessments in general. Tom and I were just having this discussion earlier. We have given, the needs assessments were pretty strong all along, and but I'm not always sure that all of the things, our concern was, are they being used more so than are they complete? I think, but you've both brought up the concern about is the community's needs being recognized in these needs assessment. And I know we addressed that last year. I don't remember if we did this year. So we'll look at that and see. Yes, thank you. You know, to give us a little credit, we did put the conditional ones in yellow, partially in yellow. The words, but not the part around it was not yellow. Okay. But your view is that more of these should be partial than substantial.
Well, that's true, but I'm using the coding that you gave.
Oh, okay.
To be able to have a different color.
From last year's assessment.
Got you.
So then you can
Previous.
review and see, oh, this is what's changed.
Exactly. I like that. Thank you. We can then study ourselves over time and see if we're changing. All right. Any more before we move on to EIS? We can always come back at the end. Yeah. Go ahead.
And the interpreter needs the mic. Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Philip. And I'm curious, is the CIS system, I took the EIS system training during my time in COAB. And at that time, I was working with COAB and I was taking the training for EIS. And I wasn't required to take it, but the training is about 30 years old. And so I'm questioning what the filtering system is, the screening system is for new cops versus old cops, new police officers versus old police officers, and then the last. And who is responsible for managing the EIS system and, you know, reviewing it, and who's responsible for managing that? Like, who is in charge of that?
This is for EIS, or was this the LMS?
For EIS.
Okay.
I don't remember there being any civilian training.
Information system.
Well,
The appointment information system.
Okay.
I can tell you who manages EIS. So within within the professional services division, is it professional service? Yeah. I'm sorry, Professional Standards Division. There are two EIS administrators where when the alert comes in, they look at the alert and they'll forward it on for the RU. RU can forward it on to a supervisor. An intervention can be put in, and then it makes its way back up, all the way up the chain. We'll get into that in a bit when we get to the EIS presentation, looking at how many get forwarded on and all that stuff. Does that answer your question?
For now.
Yes, it does. We can go ahead and get in depth about that a little bit later. I do have a secondary question, though. When it comes to the training of the division, like the division training that they have, I am just curious. When you mentioned the supervisor and the supervising that's going to be happening, who's going to be supervising the training of the police officers? When it comes to the department, of the standardizing of this training, who's going to be the one that's going to be doing that? I mean, I know that they have it for the last 6 months. There hasn't really been any supervision of the training itself. Not that we've noticed. So if you wouldn't mind just maybe elaborating on that, what does that structure look like? Supervising the trainers themselves.
Well, there is first of all, there is a management structure in place in the training division now. Captain Erica Hurley is in charge. She's new to that division. And she has lieutenants and sergeants that work for her. So there is a supervisory structure, and there's curriculum development, there's different components of the training bureau, so the training division. So, and there's also the actual delivery of the training is being supervised, quote unquote, by these new evaluation systems that I talked about. So that's one way. There are also these training managers are observing the training. We have our people observing the training. DOJ just observed the training last week. So there's a lot of people observing the training for quality and quantity in addition to the management structure there. So I'm not sure if that answers your question or not.
Yes, it does. There was a couple concerns, though. When I had worked there, I paid close attention to how the police officers responded to the training. Mm-hmm. When the DOJ came and checked it out, then I noticed that the whole mannerism and behaviors would change. And so I would see what it looked like beforehand and afterwards. And I noticed once the DOJ left that they didn't take it as seriously. So I saw this with my own two eyes. I mean, I'm not expecting them to, think that Big Brother's watching them all the time. But I see that there is a bias. When somebody is there that can, make an effort change on them, they will act a different way. Is there a way to have that the evaluation that is being done, how are we measuring it to show that we're being compliant regardless of who's observing?
Yeah. So I can respond to that in a couple ways. I mean, I think that's a good point. Things do change depending on who's in the room, and I've had that experience. But I think a couple of things. I've not always had confidence in all the people over there, but over time, the people that are running the place right now, I personally have confidence in that they represent a different philosophy and mission that's more reflective of Chief Outlaw and what she's trying to achieve. And so we haven't faced any resistance to these ideas that we've proposed and the community's proposed about treating people with dignity and respect. And so, there's always going to be, I've worked with other training academies and here as well, there's always going to be people on the staff that are one or two that are maybe don't buy in, or there's officers in the class. I've noticed there's, out of 30 officers, there's always one or two that are cynical, that don't believe in this stuff. But that's to be expected. And I guess my main answer to you is just have you have to have some faith and trust that some of these people, and give them a chance. And then again, the student evaluations, we made it very firm, and it took a while to get this in place, that they're not to have the officers' names on them, that they're to be given time to fill these things out without interruption. They're not allowed to talk to each other while they're doing it, and to be honest and candid about what you thought of this instructor and of this class. And so that's being done in our presence and our absence. So I'm feeling more confident. I understand your concern, though. So
I appreciate it. Thank you.
thank you. I think we should let Tom do his thing on the EIS, and then, no, I'll go over here and switch the buttons for you.
So I'll be talking about the EIS, which is the Employee Information System, and just to give a broad overview. So the Employee Information System is a way to identify potentially problematic officers. If you can identify them, you can provide an intervention. It is a career-saving system to avoid a larger problem. It's not a disciplinary system, but it's used to provide intervention on officers that might be going in a bad direction. So basically, turn around here as well. There's 5 paragraphs within the EIS section. 3 of them we found substantial compliance with. Paragraph 120 in our last report had been partial, and we believe that they've now substantially complied with paragraph 120. 116 and 117 still hold some conditions around substantial compliance. We also provided a system assessment of EIS to see how it's working as an overall system to be able to identify those potentially problematic officers. We'll go through it, but we look at the alert types, whether they're forwarded to RU, the interventions that are put forth, as well as the time taken to be able to go through the process. You want it to be somewhat of an early warning system and be able to catch things before they escalate too far. I'm gonna. What's an alert and what's an RU? I apologize. So basically, an EIS alert, there are thresholds that paragraph 118 and 119 deal with those thresholds. 3 uses of force in a 6-month period. You can have 3 complaints within a 6-month period, or 2 complaints of the same type in a 6-month period. There's a number of different thresholds that create this alert, and then that is forwarded to the RU, which is the responsibility unit manager, who will look at it and say, there might be something here. I may need to have a discussion with the employee, or I can see the information. I don't think that there needs to be a discussion with the employee, but it's basically a heads up to the RU to say, you may want to take a look at this officer. And I'm going to switch seats so that I can turn more easily. Okay. Yes. So for paragraph 116, there's kind of two parts to this. One of them are particular reviews that supervisors need to do for officers. One of them is a review for their annual performance evaluation, and then another is a review if the officer is new to the supervisor's command, or if the supervisor changes assignments, they have to look at all the officers that are new to their command. So these are new to command reviews. What we've seen is a fairly large improvement in in compliance with needing to do those reviews, and not only doing the reviews, but doing them within the prescribed 30-day period. So for subsection A, which is the annual performance evaluation reviews, there's an approximate, I believe it's 96%. With the subsection B reviews, which is the new to command. Those have fluctuated in the last three quarters. But when you take both of those together, it's a approximate overall 85% compliance rate. Obviously, more is better. The 116A reviews being 97% means that the 116B reviews can be improved, but there has been some fluctuation. PPB has also implemented a performance discussion tracker, which is kind of a note-taking for the officer's career. And if the supervisor doesn't do the review that they are required to do, they will receive a PDT entry, which informs that supervisor, this person did not do what they were supposed to do. The second part of 116 is a broader, it's similar to the overall system assessment that PPB is required to enhance their EIS to more effectively identify potentially problematic officers, units, supervisors. When we have looked at this system, we had noted in the past that there wasn't an objective decline criteria. If the alert was created, there was a lot of subjectivity as to whether it would be forwarded on to the RU. What PPB has now done is they have created, these are distinct, concrete reasons why something would not be forwarded on. If it doesn't meet one of these criteria, it will be forwarded on. So it's a much more objective system. This has resulted in a higher percent of EIS alerts being forwarded on to the RU. And we'll get into the numbers in a little bit when we go to the further system assessment. However, these have also created a high number of alerts that go on to the RU managers and potentially then on to the officer's more direct supervisor. So again, when you talk about the system assessment, we'll talk about how that high number of alerts also impacts the overall effectiveness of the system. For paragraph 117, this was a paragraph that had been recently revised with the settlement agreement. It's that PPB will use force audit data to identify potentially problematic groups and units. So this is taking a number of people that work at the same precinct at the same time and comparing those people against other people who work in similar situations. So this is a fairly new implemented system. The process, it still needs to be refined. We've been provided with a fairly decent outline of it. There's still specifics that have to be nailed down, including what analyses are done when something doesn't go on to the RU, kind of the same decline criteria that we talked about with the single person, with the single member alerts, as well as when they will be forwarded to the RU and all of that stuff. There is, like I said, the high number of individual single person alerts. There's the potential for the high number of those to impact the group alerts and impact the resources that are available to look at the group alerts. So it's also something that needs to be worked out. And paragraph 118 and 119 look at the actual thresholds which will trigger an EIS alert. PPB has complied with the required thresholds. We maintain that those thresholds don't appear to be the most effective, but the settlement agreement says PPB will use these thresholds, maintain the previous thresholds, and add the one threshold related to force, which they have done. But again, the effectiveness is kind of undermined by a high number of volume, kind of that intervention rate, and the reliability of those thresholds to identify officers that are considered to be truly problematic. And with 120, this was the requirement of PPB to train a second EIS administrator. PPB, I believe since we've been here, has always had a second EIS administrator. And that second EIS administrator had always been trained, received on-the-job training. What we asked PPB to do was to memorialize the training that a new EIS administrator would receive for the situation of if for some reason next week both EIS administrators win the lottery and don't ever come back to work, what's the next person going to know? How do you transfer that institutional knowledge? And so what PPB did is they created a EIS training manual and has all the information that an EIS administrator would need to know to be able to take on that role. And so finally, our report includes a system assessment. We'll go through some of the data that we had in the report. It's not all the data that was in the report, but some of the more important parts. And we'll go over our general conclusion that we had in the report is that it appears that the strict adherence to the settlement agreement has impacted. In some ways, PPB's ability to have an effective system, but we'll talk about that. We'll go through some of the numbers. So this is looking at the types of EIS alerts that might be created and whether they are forwarded on to the RUs. From here, you can also kind of gauge which types of alerts come up most often. For instance, Force had 944 EIS alerts, and this was in a one-year period. Compare that with commendations, which was only 42. So by far, Force alerts are the most common. If you look at how they are forwarded to the RUs, you'll see that nearly every other one is forwarded at about at least 90%. Force, however, is not forwarded at a 91%. And what forwarded means is forwarded on to the RU for the RU to be able to take a look at it. This 45% though, it also has to take into account that many of these, I believe it was about 82% of these would have been forwarded to the RU if they hadn't met the one criteria of no new force was created. So what happened is an arrest would drop off. And so when the arrest drops off, your uses of force to arrest might increase to make that, to meet the threshold. If there was no new use of force, then that alert would not be forwarded onto the RU. So when you look at this 45%, it's not fair to say they're not forwarding the force ones on. It's that most of those are meeting the criteria that there was no new use of force, and therefore that's why it wasn't forwarded on. I don't know if that made sense. I'm not really sure.
You're talking about like an escalation in force as the arrest progresses?
No, so what the EIS does is it takes this 5-year period. As the one day, as we go to tomorrow, 5 years ago, the last day is going to drop off. If that day you had an arrest, so let's say that you've got two uses of force to 10 arrests, so that's 20%. If one of those drops off, then you've gone to now 2 out of 9 because the arrest dropped off because the time period moved past that day. So when that happens, your your force to arrest ratio is going to increase, and that might make it so that a flag is created on you. But you didn't actually use any new force. The arrest dropped off, right? The denominator changed, and that's what made it go to a higher percentage of force, but there was no use of force. So in that situation, they wouldn't forward it on because it's not that a new use of force pushed you up. It's that a dropping off of an arrest pushed you up. Does that make more sense now? Yeah. Okay. If there's other, as I was talking, it didn't make sense in my mind, and that's not uncommon, but it's just, I want to make sure that you guys there's no questions. Yes, sir.
Can we use the microphone, please? I'm sorry. No, over there.
To Dan.
when I was reading it, I thought what that meant was that they were persistent in the sense that this is looking at how many uses of force there were in a 6-month period. And so if all the uses of force were in the first 4 months and then a flag gets sent, then in month 5, if there's no use of force, it would probably persist the next month because you still have 3 uses of force in 6 months. So is that also one of the things that makes it drop off, or am I just totally misunderstanding?
No, that would be you would basically maintain the flag originally. So if you had a flag for uses of force, and the supervisor would look at that and say, okay, this flag has been maintained. There's not a new flag. I don't believe there's a new flag that's created for that. It's more of the arrest dropped off. So even smaller numbers. So yeah, you've got 2 out of 5 that arrest drops off. So 2 out of 5 is 40%. Arrest drops off. Now you're 2 out of 4. Now you're 50%. It looks like you're using force at a higher rate, but that's just not how it is. It's just the arrest dropped off. Okay. So again, these are not only were they forwarded to the supervisor or forwarded to the RU, these are only ones that were forwarded to the RU. So if you look at force, 29% are RU reviewed only. They're not forwarded on to the officer's direct supervisor. 51% are forwarded on to the officer's direct supervisor, and 19% receive some type of intervention. So that's kind of, this is kind of the pathway that it could take.
Can I get the mic?
Let me finish up this one part real quick, but that's okay.
I'm good.
So the 2 ones that we focus on a lot in our report are the force ones and the complaint ones. Now the complaint ones you'll see very rarely are they forwarded on to the supervisor, and even rarer are they intervening with the officer on those. And the reason for that is because if you have a third complaint, a lot of times that third complaint is still open, and to have a supervisor discussion with the officer might be considered a command counseling. And so if that third complaint is sustained, then you run into somewhat of a double jeopardy situation where the officer cannot be disciplined twice. So if the supervisor talks with the officer, that's a command counseling, and if the third one is sustained, the officer can say, "Wait a second, I already received command counseling for that incident." We've asked PPB to look at ways to get around that and remind PPB that they're focusing on the trend of 3 as opposed to the individual third one that caused it. The legal considerations aside, we've talked with PPB about perhaps deferring an intervention. There's problems with that though, because deferred intervention is less effective than immediate intervention. So one of the ways that PPB is also trying to get to address that is they've implemented a multivariate kind of approach to identifying potentially problematic officers. It's a longer timeline. It looks at more variables than the single variable thresholds like force over time. This one would look at, your number of complaints relative to other officers and your number of force and your sick time relative to other officers and over, a 1 to 2 year timeline as opposed to this shorter timeline of 6 months. So we believe that that's probably a better way to get to more potentially problematic officers than the current way, and would largely avoid that issue of discussing the single complaint that might cause the double jeopardy situation. So you can go ahead. Another thing that we looked at was the amount of time it takes to do an EIS alert. The directives give up to 120 days to do a EIS intervention, which EIS is also known as early intervention system. 120 days may not be early intervention. In practice, PPB completes and closes the EIS alerts relatively quickly. They do adhere to the concept of it being an early intervention system. So for overall closure time, those that are forwarded to the RU, so not just the ones that are declined outright, but the ones that actually go to the RUs, the average amount of time is 34.5 days. And notably, 60% of those get closed in less than 30 days. And again, there's a 120-day timeline, and PPB closes them out much quicker. Even the ones that receive an intervention, 40% are closed out, the intervention implemented and closed out within a 30-day period. So in terms of early intervention, it appears that the approach by PPB complies with that. And then finally, the system assessment. Like I said before, it appears that the strict adherence to the settlement agreement has kind of put PPB into a catch-22, in that they have a more limited system, but they're complying with the settlement agreement. I talked about that other approach of a multivariate approach and looking at officers on a spectrum of variables, being more appropriate and in a somewhat more effective system. The settlement agreement requires PPB to maintain their current thresholds, though. So there's a kind of catch-22 there. And so while we understand that PPB is currently bound by the settlement agreement, we do encourage the revision of thresholds or the use of that multivariate approach. But the reality is that paragraph 118 and 119 set the standards for the thresholds right now. So PPB must maintain those. We are encouraged with the steps taken by PPB. We had recommended something like this a couple of years ago. PPB has actually, though, taken it upon themselves to create it, expand it, and we look forward to the full implementation. And now we have questions and comments. Do you want me to?
Yeah, go back to your own seat.
Okay. I think Mr. Handelman has a question or comment.
Well, my first comment is, this is barely mentioned in the report, and you didn't mention it tonight. There were 57 criminal complaints against police officers in this past year. I am shocked at that. There's no analysis of what those criminal complaints are about. That's a lot of police officers having criminal complaints against them. The officers who are supposed to be protecting and serving our community. So I'd like to hear more about that. But
2017, 2018, 2017.
The last year.
Whatever it is,
Yeah. Okay.
It's your time period.
All right, gotcha.
You've got the number in there twice. Okay, so you also in the report are talking about how there are too many alerts going out about use of force, which in the previous report you were saying there weren't enough alerts going out. And the suggestion is that people are not paying attention to it because there's too many. But there's no mention whether the number of alerts went up because they redefined what force is last year.
I can, so only 1.5 quarters of data within this would include those category 4.
Okay, so these are the data not from the last report until now, which is what I would assume from October to October, but instead what you're saying is that these are only the calendar year 2017.
No, these are 2017 quarter 3.
Yeah.
Through 2018 quarter 2. So that would be, 2.5.
Right.
Approximately 2 quarters of data with the new category 3. So we can anticipate that in the next year, force alerts will increase because they now have that new category 4. So there's going to be officers who are more likely to use force because the definition has been redefined to be more comprehensive or to be more encompassing.
Okay.
And I can respond to your first comment about the 57 complaints being a lot of complaints. You know, ideally, you don't want any complaints, but
These are criminal complaints. Criminal, as in they got arrested for something.
no.
Yes,
These are-
that's
these are
what
just
it says.
No, criminal complaint is a member receives any complaint that includes an allegation of criminal conduct. So it doesn't necessarily mean they were arrested. It's that an allegation included, the allegation was of criminal conduct.
Okay, that's not clear from the report.
It's, okay.
Well, we can clarify that. What page?
It just says criminal conduct.
It's on 52. It's got the definitions for each of the threshold categories.
So you're saying this is when a civilian files a complaint or another officer.
Member receives any complaint that includes an allegation of criminal
So it's
conduct.
not a criminal complaint in the sense that I interpreted it to mean.
That would be correct.
Okay, well that's relief, I guess, but it's still disturbing. Okay, so I'm trying to wrap my mind around the timeline.
Sure.
You're saying you did 3 quarters worth of data in here.
4, 2017 quarter 3, 2018 or 2017 quarter 4.
3, 4, 1, and 2. Right.
Yes,
They changed the definition in the middle of quarter 3 last year in August. So almost all the data include the new category 4 definitions. And that's probably why so many things were triggered. And I don't understand why that wasn't part of the analysis. And so the suggestion that I would have, if you think there are too many alerts going forward, is to remove the new categories and say, ask the Bureau, since they only want to adhere to the DOJ agreement word for word, sometimes, and sometimes they don't, that say that 5 category 4s will trigger one, the new category 4s, not the old ones, and then 3 of the old ones will trigger. I think then that way you will get fewer alerts moving forward.
So I can respond to that. One of the things that's going to happen going forward, it's not that the Category 4 force won't trigger an alert. It's that when the EIS administrator receives a force alert, they can take into account that some of them are Category 4 and not count them as a somewhat in the same system that you're talking. Well, maybe Category 5, Category 4, you need 5 of them. It's a similar concept of we can reduce that, and that didn't happen with this data either.
Right, but that should be codified. It shouldn't be up to them subjectively to say, well, this one's not so bad. To us, pointing a firearm, which is Category 4, is very, very serious, because when you point a gun at somebody, you better be ready to use that gun. I don't want to see that being dismissed as not a serious use of force because some, a sergeant said, "Oh, well, that's a Category 4, so I'm not going to call them in here." So that's got to be dealt with. It's very, very important. And then just in terms of math, you said 911 alerts were forwarded, and that means every RU manager received 2.5 per day. But that actually means the entire bureau received 2.5 per day, not any single manager. Because 911 divide by 365 is 2.5.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Anybody else? Philip, yeah.
So just getting some clarifications and talking about the complaints from the community against the police officers, or are we talking about complaints from police officers against police officers? Is there a differentiation between there? Is it the same, or?
That would all be rolled into complaints, yeah. So if it's a bureau initiated complaint, it still would be put into the EIS system.
Okay. So with that information, I do have a concern. It's a pretty big concern because, I just need some confirmation on this. My concern is this. If a complaint is filed, like I'll use my own example. I did file a complaint. It was dropped. When it was dropped, I don't feel that there was any type of a warning that was given, or a warning that a threshold had been reached. They said that there was no need for an investigation. They closed it. And so if they're just going off and they're just excusing all of these different complaints, how do you track and know where? Well, I'm just saying that this situation, I complained, and I feel like it should have been triggered. There should have been an investigation. There should have been a follow-up, because I know that there were many complaints on it, and there were many complaints that were somewhat similar. And so how do you measure it? I don't feel like it where is the justification on the threshold being triggered, and who's tracking this?
I mean, without seeing the particular officer, I can't tell you whether your complaint would have created a threshold. And I don't know what IPR, I haven't read your complaint, so I don't know why IPR administratively closed it. What I can say, though, is that, again, using the 6 months.
Okay, now I'm not saying why that specific one was dropped.
Sure,
I'm just
sure.
saying, like, if a complaint is dropped and somebody makes that decision to say, oh, well, you know what, we don't need to worry about triggering that on the threshold. It's not going to be a category 4 or category 5. If there's somebody out there that's letting things be dropped, like the complaints keep on getting dropped, how is that addressed?
So that would still be part of the EIS view, and one of the things, like I had kind of talked about, using the 6-month time frame is problematic for that. We, in a report that we did over a year ago, or maybe it was a year ago now, we looked at using the complaint thresholds and using the force thresholds to identify, are the officers who use force more often, or are the officers who receive complaints more often, are they being able to be captured by the current thresholds? We saw that a number that weren't really problematic. Maybe they had 2 uses of force in a 2-year period, but because those uses of force were close together, they got flagged. They got an EIS alert. But there was also a couple officers who had a higher number of forces or a higher number of complaints that didn't receive an EIS alert because their force or their complaints were spread out more evenly. They were spread out farther apart. What we think that one of the things that we're encouraged with PPB's multivariate system is that it takes into account that larger time frame, and it takes into account more of those variables. So if there is an officer that is racking up complaints, but maybe not close enough to create the current threshold to create a current alert, they will get captured in with that new system, and that's something I think we're more we're eager to see compared with the current shorter time frame thresholds.
And let me add further, Philip, that the mention that it was dropped, it wasn't investigated, it's still in the system, your complaint. So it's still recorded, and if there are other complaints from that officer, about that officer, your complaint will add up and push that officer over the threshold, okay? So it's still in there.
Okay, that's clear, thank you.
Yeah, and secondly, it was investigated at some level. Now, our 4th quarterly report will cover accountability, which includes IPR and the independent police review investigations and internal affairs investigations.
IPR is what?
The independent police review, that's the civilian review board under the auditor's office, headed up by Constantine. That group does independent reviews. The internal affairs does their reviews. So it was investigated at some level. So our 4th quarter report, we will look at how those things are being investigated, what training went on for those people that are doing those investigations, how well are they done, that sort of thing. But you're in the system. I mean, the point is, it doesn't just wiped off like someone said, oh, let's not count that one. It's still counted. It just didn't reach the thresholds that Tom is talking about. Maybe not. I hope that helps a little bit.
Okay. No, that's great. I do have a follow-up question. So, a police officer that uses excessive force, let's say that he killed somebody in that situation, James Chase, there were 2 complaints that were involved with beatings, broken arm, bashed in head. Went to jail, needed medical attention, but he died on the way to getting medical attention. And the court, they decided to defer and forgive the police officer for that situation. So I want to see, was that something that was put into the complaint system? Was that put on file? And the reason why I question about that is because Chris Humphrey, the officer at that time, I believe it was 2009, 2008, if I am recalling that correctly. In 2009, there was excessive force where they used a beanbag and shot a 12-year-old girl, and that got forgiven. And then John Elfridge, he actually used excessive force and ended up killing somebody. He still had the job. So I'm curious about this threshold, the time concerns that we're measuring against. If we see this pattern continue, where we have police officers that have committed homicide or acts of atrocities, and we see a continual trend from these people, whether or not they're the mental health, how do we screen for this? How do we justify or advocate for this? That the trigger is being effective, that it's working out. I mean, I've had many concerns with different officers, and I'm just using these ones as an example. If the courts, like the grand jury, decides that they accept that this was an appropriate use of force, then does that mean that that's not going to be a trigger, or would that be counted as a trigger?
Well, I think it would still be counted as a trigger. It's still in the system as a complaint. Here's my assessment.
No, it wouldn't.
Oh, not.
It wouldn't. What happens is that it is investigated as is an administrative investigation. I don't believe it would be a complaint, though, in terms of an EIS.
Okay.
But it still does receive an administrative investigation, which goes through all the same steps as a complaint. So it would be reviewed by the Professional Standards Division, NIA.
Yes.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And
Okay. That helps out a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the systems are not perfect. I mean, honestly, you alluded earlier, Philip, to the system being 30 years old. When we first started this, we were a little surprised. The EIS system that the Bureau was using was pretty primitive, and we've been pushing that hard, and they've made some major changes. They have new people in there. They have new systems. They're looking at a very sophisticated multivariate thing that Tom alluded to, which I think is a great idea. So you look for officers who are at risk in all kinds of things. Someone who doesn't show up to work on time and abuses overtime and whatever. They're also the...
That does cost money.
Yes, that costs money, and it also... Other data analysis shows that these patterns are kind of connected, that citizen complaints can be connected to use of force and stuff like that. So they're beginning to mine that data, and I want to give them a little time to do that and see what they come up with. So they're a lot further ahead than they were. But, the whole accountability system is problematic here nationwide about where... how discipline is handled, how interventions. We said that their hands are kind of tied on intervening with officers who have 3 or more complaints. I think there has to be workarounds on that. There has to be things set up. But I think I try to remain optimistic about this, but I do think a vigilance by us and the community and DOJ is helpful at times. And so...
Can you just clarify for me when you talk about the excessive alerts creating a situation in which they just can't sort of be analyzed because there's too many? How do you sort of determine when that's a problem with the system and maybe when that's a problem with the conduct of the officers?
I don't think that they can't be analyzed. I think it becomes I mean, it does take time for the supervisors to do it. When it's a problem of excessive volume versus a problem of excessive officer behavior, that's kind of your question, how to make that
Yeah, I guess that's
distinguishment.
how are you making that distinction?
I think it's just the sheer number of it. Again, 911 alerts. These are often for officers who may use force. A lot of them are for supervisors who may use, make 2 arrests or 3 arrests, and it so happens that in one of the arrests, force was used. Those aren't necessarily problematic. They're a small number of arrests. And it's a good question because it is kind of hard to, a little bit hard to distinguish that, which is, again, where that multivariate approach is an improvement because it takes into account a lot of other things rather than these hard numbers that, can be explained by other things.
Yeah.
It's difficult to be able to say those are problematic officers.
And it also, from an organizational perspective, it's important that the system has some legitimacy. You want the supervisors to buy in and participate in this. When they feel overwhelmed by the system and they feel that it's also identifying officers who are not problematic officers, they become cynical, which is what our surveys suggest to some extent, that this system needs to be rethought a little bit in terms of overloading them. You're right, the first year, as Dan pointed out, we didn't feel they were sending enough alerts, and now when you just shotgun alerts out there, it requires good supervision too, and I'm glad that the supervisory training, as we pointed out, was much better this year than it was previously, that focused on how to deal with these problems. And the folks that run EIS administratively, I think, did a decent job of going over there with the supervisors during in-service and saying, hey, you guys need to take this seriously and tell us what we need to do to correct any problems. But that there was definitely a commitment to making the system work. Now, so my point is some of it's a system thing. You've got to, if you're a good supervisor and you have a half a dozen employees, you know who your screw-ups are and who are your good employees. And if you feel good employees are being dinged by this, you're not going to buy the system. And so that's a non-scientific way of looking at it. But I'm just telling you that's also something that's going on right now.
But isn't part of the goal of the system to take it out of this sort of like supervisory instinct realm and put it into data?
Well, it's both, because you never want the data system to sort of be the tail wagging the dog. You want it to be suggestive. It's never definitive. It's like, especially with individuals. I mean, I do a lot of research with large numbers, and it's very hard to predict. I can tell you that, people who have contact with the police are more likely to feel this than people who don't have contact. We have all that data, but I can't tell you that you're going to feel that way because we're all error variants around the mean. You know what I mean? So when you start to predict individual behavior, it's very difficult, which is why I would need to know a lot about you and your background and all the things you do before I would try to even predict your behavior. So I think that we want to see this more as a tool than as a replacement for supervision. There's no good substitute for good supervision. But we would like to see it used more for intervention, to talk to coach. We like to see training on how do you coach people? How do you support, you can't just punish people all the time. But I mean, a lot of it's preventative, right? You want, hey, someone's at risk of getting in trouble. That's the whole point. It looks like there's something going on here.
And I'll also say, you know, kind of taking it out of that theoretical realm and looking at, you know, kind of analyses that we had done, not for this report, but for our past report, we had seen that there were a large number of officers who received alerts.
So you said the fashion court?
I'm sorry?
What court?
Take it out of theoretical and more look at data in our last report.
In our last report.
Yes,
Thank you.
and in not our last report, but it was about a year ago or so that we looked and we saw a number of officers had received alerts that over a 2-year period may have only had 2 complaints, but those 2 complaints were spaced together in such a way that it created an alert. We would generally call those false positives, that these really weren't the problematic officers or potentially problematic officers, because over a 2-year period they only received those 2, and it just so happens that those created the alert. So looking at that, we can say, you know, a lot of those may not have needed to go out. Those are the ones that may be unnecessarily overburdensome, and those are the ones that with a revised system may not have ever been flagged in the first place. And had they not been flagged, there would have been, you know, fewer that had gone out, and it would have been a little bit more effective. And so that's kind of, that also influences what we say in this report was prior analyses.
Thank you.
Excuse me. One last question. I promise this is my last one.
Sure.
Dennis mentioned about the survey that they received from the public. From that survey, how did that you're using that to support the discussion? I remember the first meeting that we had. There was maybe 150 people here. I mean, it was like overwhelming. I mean, now you see how many we have now. These are like prominent, maybe 4 or 5 of us, or prominent members of the community. The rest of them are lawyers, right? So how do you really look at trying to satisfy that survey from the public if you're not getting a very good, strong response because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of trust?
Okay, well, that's
it doesn't
why,
really seem like there's a lot of credibility here. I mean, we see what we started out with to what we have now.
Yeah, so I understand attendance at public meetings is a strange phenomenon in some ways. It's a select group of people who have a strong interest in the topic area. No offense to anyone here, but you don't necessarily represent the average Portland person. As a researcher, I'm an enormous fan of drawing random probability samples that represent different segments of the community, which is exactly what the DHM survey did in twice, or at least it's been done since we started. And I think they're going to start it up again under the new PSEP. That will, in fact, does show that certain members of the community, people of color, LGBT, others, and even people, the middle-class whites, have some feeling that there may be bias in the way people are treated. Now, that's not unusual. That's in a lot of cities. But, you know, that can tie, and the Police Bureau this year responded by having 3 hours of training on bias and on procedural justice. So there is some linkage there. I trust those surveys a lot more than I trust meetings like this. I trust the people here because they're extra knowledgeable, and I like talking to you because you have more in-depth understanding of the issues. But in terms of how the public feels about the police and how they're treated during encounters, I would rather prefer a random sample.
Thank you.
Hi, Dan Handelman again.
Dan, I'm sorry.
Not an ordinary citizen. So the DOJ has said, and I'm saying this in part to lay the groundwork for your next report too, has said repeatedly although not recently, that this agreement is a floor. And if that Portland decides to go further, that they're not going to go into Judge Marcus Simon's court and say, you know, you're out of compliance because you added something that was better. So I don't really understand this thing about the strict adherence to the settlement agreement being something that's stopping them from achieving their goals. I'm saying that in part two because you heard the chair of the CRC complain that they're not getting anywhere trying to get the standard of review changed. It occurred to me, though, that, you know, going back to the comment I made before about the criminal complaints, and I read the definition, it should definitely say misconduct complaint and not complaint because it sounds like a criminal complaint to me. That if an officer is arrested and gets a DUI, it doesn't look like that puts anything into the EIS system. So I may be wrong about that. It may just not be something that triggers these alerts, but it's not mentioned among the things that make an alert come up.
That would be a bureau-initiated allegation, and that would go into the EIS, and that would also go into the officer's performance.
If they're investigated for misconduct, but if they're just arrested and there's not a concurrent investigation administratively, and so that means that those 57 could include multiple arrests, is perhaps what you're saying. Captain Bell?
I would just say that anytime an officer...
I'm sorry, I need you to use the microphone.
And again, this is Jeff Bell, Portland Police Bureau. Anytime an officer is arrested, we open a concurrent administrative investigation. And that's whether they're arrested within the city of Portland or outside. So there will always be an administrative investigation triggered by a criminal investigation. Does that help?
Yeah, as long as somebody reports it. No,
well, if they're arrested.
That was a snide remark. Okay, I just want to say a few more things. I know you're running out of time. Okay, no, let me just finish up what I'm doing. So you talked about the supervisor training. One of the things that was in that training was how to use the discipline guide and to understand the mitigating factors that might make you not use the guide the way it's written, or if a kind of finding against them falls into more than one category. It doesn't say whether that training is given to the civilian or officers who are members of the police review board, who also have to make those decisions in addition to the supervisors. And I'm hoping that either that is already happening or that's a recommendation that you're going to make.
I'll have to look into that. Yeah.
Okay, and then I guess for now, and I'll give this back to Captain Bell, there were 111 alerts for complaints. That means 111 officers had 2 to 3 complaints against them that triggered it. And I really would appreciate if you can split out the 2 different kinds of complaint and the 3 different kinds of force triggers, because it helps us get a bigger picture about what's going on. But 111 alerts that applied to 86 officers, and you said that was only a relatively small proportion. That's almost 10% of the 920 officers at the Portland Police Bureau. That's a lot to me. That means 1 out of every 10 officers walking out on the street has 2 to 3 complaints against them in a 6-month time period that triggered these EIS complaints. So I think that is a very significant number, not a small number.
And actually, I didn't have anything else.
I just want to say, too, on the record, that there's a couple of mistakes on this little chart that I made. I'm going to try to fix them up and send them back to you.
Let the record reflect that Dan did make a mistake.
Mistakes.
And we're going to correct it.
And I'm willing to admit it.
Okay. And so are we. Thank you, Dan. This thing about number of complaints, that's a debated subject. I think Portland, I would be interested in comparing the numbers to other cities. I mean, I think there are cities that have a lot more complaints actually than that. And so, but that is, and many of the complaints are something that in all cities, the pattern is the same, which is courtesy. It's not beating somebody up, but he was disrespectful to me. And that's something we've worked hard on. I think the Training Bureau is now working hard on to introduce procedural justice training and equity training. And so, but it doesn't happen overnight. You don't change the culture overnight, that kind of thing. So.
Well, certainly, and, they're certainly not applying procedural justice to the crowd control training that behaviors that they're exhibiting. So that's another topic. And you mentioned that a little bit in the report that crowd control needs more looking at. Also, there was one of the things that you said had to do with officers who have fewer arrests and therefore their ratio of using force is higher. But that doesn't mean it's not problematic. I mean, if there's a supervisor who uses force in 1 of 3 arrests, that might be an issue. I mean, I don't think, and again, that's why I think they shouldn't be subjective and there should be something written down so that it's not just say, oh, well, that's Lieutenant so-and-so, so we're not going to look at it.
And I don't disagree with you that it shouldn't be looked at. They're still forwarded on to RUs. If there's no new use of force and that's what causes the flag, then that would be declined. But if a supervisor does use force and they've only got 4 arrests, that would be forwarded on. So no one's saying that it shouldn't be looked at. One consideration is that there have only been 4 arrests and it was only a single use of force. So it's a consideration, but no one's saying that it shouldn't be forwarded on, blankly.
Okay, and I have one more comment about the criminal complaints.
Yes, sir.
3% of the regular complaints that got triggered ended up with the officers having intervention and the supervisor talking to him. Zero of the complaints that contain criminal allegations were either given to the RU managers or ended up in interventions. Can you explain that?
I can tell you the 3% with the complaints receiving an intervention, those are most likely that the 3rd allegation, which caused the threshold break, which caused the alert, the 3rd complaint would have been administratively closed, which is a fairly quick process. And at that point, then the supervisor could go and talk with the officer. It wouldn't have put the officer in any type of double jeopardy situation. With the criminal complaints, those are going to take longer to look at. I don't believe that those can be administratively closed. So you're not going to have that. Here's the administrative closure and give the opportunity to go talk with the officer. Again, 8 out of 108 of the complaints were forwarded past the RU point. Most of them are not going to be forwarded on to the supervisor or have the officer have an intervention. If I went and looked at these 8 particular cases, I might be able to tell you exactly what happened in all 8 of those, but it's a fairly low number, and that's because most likely the allegation was administratively closed.
I'm sorry, can we get the microphone back to you, please?
Repeating your question already.
Oh.
Why don't you just repeat it?
The question is, why were 0 criminal complaints forwarded on? And again, that's because those are still going to be open. Those are not going to be administratively closed. And again, deferred intervention is much less effective than immediate intervention. So in the 3 that quicker intervention could be had, it would have been more beneficial than the criminal complaints, which...
But just a qualification on that. Deferred intervention could be effective if this person continues to engage in a pattern that deserves interruption. But more immediate consequences generally, based on dozens of psychological studies, suggest are more likely to shape behavior than long-term effects.
Okay, I'm sorry to keep going back to the same point over and over and over again, but I don't think you're maybe getting my point about the criminal complaints that contain criminal allegations, that none of them went to the RU managers. Like almost all of the regular complaints went to the RU managers and then stopped. And then 8 of them went on for interventions, right?
No, 100% of the criminal complaints had the RU review. Out of the 54 criminal complaints...
Oh, right, okay. So 0 went from the RU managers to the supervisors. And then
that is correct.
0 ended up in interventions.
That's correct. And so the RU manager is going to get it. It's going to be forwarded from the EIS administrator to the RU manager. The RU manager is not going to forward it on because it's most likely still going to be an open complaint, an open criminal complaint.
Thank you for explaining.
Thank you, Dan. Anybody else tonight? Last chance. Is there anyone, Amy, that wants to ask a question from the Oh, no. No, I'm talking about on the other.
From YouTube, or did anyone email?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well, on that note, then, we will, just in closing, we will take, we've made some notes. We will incorporate, there have been some good suggestions tonight and some good thought-provoking ideas that will cause us to take a closer look at some things. We are generally feel confident in what we've said here. And we will also, if there are changes to our report, this is a draft, also remind people, and yourselves included, I know Dan will do this because he always does, give us written comments that we will post, and then we will respond to them as we do every quarter, and then we will make some changes to the report. That the final version will go out after we get everything back on November 5th, sometime after that, a couple weeks after that. So we again thank you, and then the last quarter will be focusing on accountability, some of which you've talked about quite a bit tonight, and investigations of complaints, both by IPR and inside the Bureau for the Internal Affairs. And we'll give an update on community engagement and how the new PSEP program is working. Now that we are separate from them, we're able to help keep an eye on that and document how it's going. And Amy Ruiz, who's here tonight, is our local person who goes to all that work and keeps good records. And we even met today with the facilitators, and they seem very competent. So we look forward to seeing how that goes over the next few months. I know they have a lot of work to do. So thank you, guys. We're happy to stay around for a little bit. I think there's drinks and stuff in the back, so enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis?
Yes.
Doesn't mean that I didn't have any, that I don't appreciate your work. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Philip. We appreciate it. Thanks.